think outside the box. If you could change school and make it better, I mean, you can make the school day longer, make it shorter, go year round, do every day's a field trip, like anything. Like, what are the things that you would want to do that you think would make school better?
Oh my goodness.
I mean, and you can give me one thing, you give me 10. Just as a teacher, what do you see?
I think, kind of like you said, more freedom. And that's precarious given that you're not going to always have, but like any job, you're not always going to have the best people doing that. So what they choose to do with that freedom might not be beneficiary to students, but you will have teachers who come in and will use that to do amazing things you've never thought of before, to like teach history in reverse.
Yeah.
Like, that's a little thing, but I think that was probably so beneficial and still is, and that ability to do that. And like, we can get into the whole...
And how many schools wouldn't allow it?
Right.
You know, how many principals or whoever wouldn't even allow it?
And I think that's where it kind of starts. And I mean, we've been following this whole system for so long, like this very, what's the analogy? Like kind of...
like industrial school
yes.
system.
There's that like drawing video thing that we
Yeah.
watched a couple times, and like why we get the summers off because of like farming. That's like, well, we don't do that anymore. We're not an agrarian society.
So few people do it. That
that's why are then we structuring our school system in Northern Virginia around that when that's not it anymore.
Yeah, year round with bigger breaks would
and there's
brilliant.
I've even read things
probably easy
on we divide class grades by age. Well, not everyone is at the same ability at the same age, mentally, emotionally, and so why is that?
I wrote a short article for my website about that. It was I forget what it was called, but something about on-time graduation. I just remember sitting in a meeting where, and my principal is awesome. Like, I'll call him Dave Spage. Call him out by name. Like, he is the number one reason I have a 45-minute commute. I haven't tried to get closer to where I live is because I have a very good situation. And he was talking about, what are we doing to get some kids to graduate and do the rest? And he used the term on-time graduation a few times, and I just thought, like, that's BS. Mm-hmm. Like, that is a stupid idea. And I'm not saying but just the concept, and I know he was relaying something that came from his boss, from that boss, from whatever. If you're serious about kids learning the stuff and you also know that people learn at different rates, then why is it so important to graduate on your 13th year? Yeah. At the end of when you're 18, like, why can't a kid hang out until they're 20 if they need it?
Right.
And they say, well, we got to do the rest. And this is how they're making a bad argument. The person who's talking on-time graduation is either an idiot or is doing the bidding of an idiot. Mm-hmm. Because if you're serious about just on-time graduation, that we want to get them out as quick as we can, that we've done our jobs, why aren't we pushing for early graduation? We have a ton of kids who can graduate when they're 15, 16. Mm-hmm. They have the skills, they have the knowledge, they can pass all the tests.
Oh, yeah.
If you're really serious about moving them through in an efficient way and getting them to a job or to college, there's no discussion of early graduation. Mm-hmm. And we don't like late graduation, which means all we're really doing is stuffing everybody into this one timeline that doesn't make any sense except for setting a budget. It's literally a budget question, and no one ever says that.
If it was up to you to design what that education process for humans would be, and I'm not just saying, specifically that age,
right.
From 0 on, that would you choose to put children in classrooms in parallel rows for 6-7 hours a day, staring ahead, where the research, again, whether it's valid or not, where research claims that the most common utterance of a student is yes and no.
Right.
Okay. Would you choose that model?
I would for 2 or 3 hours a day. Not for the whole day.
Okay. But so why not for the whole day?
Student loan debt initially just looks like, oh, that's the thing I have to pay.
Mm-hmm.
And that was me coming out of high school, like, whatever, I'll go out of state to James Madison.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. Yeah, I could stay in state. I could go here. I could go there.
Yeah.
No, this is where I want to go. And I'm glad I did. But, $400 a month, I mean, I could be driving a big truck, or I could
Yeah.
be driving a Mercedes. I mean, for the equivalent cost.
Yeah.
And it's not that college wasn't worth it, because I wouldn't have my job without it. But
Mm-hmm.
you know, you got to put that in like definite terms. You know,
Yeah.
of my best friends in college, I'm the only one that, like, my like core group of guys that I hung out with a lot, I'm the only one that has kids. And of sort of go to second circle people we hung out with a decent amount.
Mm-hmm.
Of all of those people, I think only 2 of them, I'm talking about the males,
Yeah.
have kids. And for a lot of them, it's, you know, some of them got married later, but a lot of them have concerns like, well, I can't afford it,
Mm-hmm.
or they have good jobs and they make good money, but they work all the time or they travel a lot.
Yeah.
And so they travel for work. So if you have a kid, you have to travel less, which means they either take a new job or they take a pay cut. And so this entire thing comes back to this financial piece. And for a lot of those people, student loans are a big part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, like, I know our pays about like $1,000 a month in student loans.
Yeah. Like, what the?
Yeah, I have like $700 in federal loans and then like $250 in private loans every month. So it's like, yeah, it's a lot. So it's like I can barely afford like to take care of like myself, and like every now and then give money to my mom when I can.
Yeah.
And it's like, would I be able to afford diapers or afford like clothes or food and formula and everything? And I'm like, I don't think I would be able to.
That's insane. And that's where, you know, you'd also, things tend to work out, but you never want to like roll the dice that, it'll just do that. You
Exactly.
know, like, you know, like recently since we had Evie, like my parents have kicked it, like they helped us out a little bit
Mhm.
with, you know, taking part of student loans, and like, it's, I say like little stuff, but
Mhm.
in that perspective, like it's big stuff. And like,
Yeah.
I know it's costing them, but it's, I have to pay for the daycare and the
Mhm.
diapers and the rest. It's probably bad to just roll the dice and say, I will figure it out.
Yeah.
And the reality is most people do.
Yeah.
But
I
you trained
I
your
feel like
whole
I
life
like to
not
plan.
Yeah. Well, you trained your whole life to like make a thoughtful decision.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the thoughtful decision is,
Mhm.
you know, I shouldn't have the kid, or I should, you know, I
Mhm.
shouldn't buy this house because I have this
Yeah.
debt. One of my best friends from college, same thing. His student loans, he was out of state, went to JMU. His loans were basically what mine were.
Mhm.
Probably about the same, maybe just a little bit more. But his parents gave him no help during or after
Yeah.
college. So he always worked a little more than the rest of us.
Mhm.
He was paying, you know, almost $1,000 a month.
Mhm.
He delayed marriage for a while.
Yeah.
You know, he works in a city where he could ride a bike. So for a while, he didn't really even have a car.
Mhm.
You know, and he's saving all this money. So then he got married. And then it took a little while, and then they bought a house. Again, they're in a city, so it's expensive.
Yeah.
I mean, and the guy has a great job. He's a really, really smart person,
Mhm.
you know, and the fact that this is the best that he can figure out, you know, I just think like there are a lot of people who are a lot dumber than him that are just like not making good decisions either.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know.
Long time ago. That's crazy, man.
You're old.
I'm
You're so old.
I'm a big homie now, considered it something.
Yeah, right.
You know, a big bro now. I'm like, oh wow. If I'm old, man, it's crazy how time passes, man, for real. But like I said, man, for real, I think like it was crazy. Like through high school, you and Miss Cups made a huge impact in my life. Like for real. Like I mean, you know, in 9th grade with you, just made learning fun. You know, and understanding there were still rules, yet we could still get along. And I mean, we talked about Jay-Z all the time. Yeah, I remember always talking about Jay-Z. Hey, and you also told me that when you turned pro, I think I was like 14-0 at the time as an amateur. And you said and I would always talk about, you know, going pro and this, that. And you said, when you go pro, I will be there for your first pro fight. I will never forget that. You told me that. You said, hey, I will be there for your first pro fight. And, you know, 9th grade, oh, okay, cool. And then 10th, 11th, you go on through life. And then my first pro fight, who's there? You, Miss Cubs, Mrs. Good. I said, wow. I said, that's something I still talk about to this day. When we talk about this, and we talk about you, when I talk, like, my girlfriend.
I mean, I'm not going to tell. I'm in a weird place where I don't necessarily think school should be compulsory to quite the way it is. So I'm not going to... and I'm not trying to not answer your question. I'm not sure that everyone should have to do it.
Well,
I just think like if I'm making the decision for me or for my kids, I want you to be able to listen to a person who knows something. Or maybe they don't, but they have an interesting way to think about it. And I want you to be able to engage in it and listen, even if you don't like it sometimes. Like, one of the most important parts of becoming an adult, and we can argue that this shouldn't exist either, but is just learning to suck it up and get through some of these more tedious things. But sometimes they have purpose. And the kid who learns to do that when they're 10, as opposed to the person who develops it naturally by the time they're 26, the kid at 10 has this huge head start because you have all these extra boring but informative opportunities, you know?
Okay.
That's why I say, like, everybody, and I'd said this to you before, I say this all the time, everyone should take an English class and a math class. It doesn't have to be literature-based. We can read a newspaper, read a comic book. You have to be able to read and write and speak, and you need to be able to do arithmetic and basic algebra, first part of geometry. Like, after that, all the rest of high school is optional.
And I say this all the time. I say, you know, you don't know what you're going to use until you're ready to use it.
Absolutely.
And so in sort of doing the Boy Scouts always be prepared thing, like you don't know what you're going to want to know later.
Mm-hmm.
So you should learn as much of it as you can now.
Mm-hmm.
That does not mean that school is fun or always useful. I'm just saying, like, if you're here anyway, you might as well get it, you know?
I don't know. I just think, like, for a lot of people, that's probably the hardest thing to go from here's the thing I'm good at to here's how I make that my job is like the technical piece of, you know, if you're good at a thing, be good at it. And
you make money out of it.
yeah, and even word of mouth can help that to spread, but like, how do you make that like a legitimate thing?
Yeah.
And how do you make that a full-time thing?
Yeah,
or
that's
like
social media now, man. Google. I know I typed in how to become a successful personal trainer, and whatever popped up, I clicked on it. You know, whatever question I may have, just Google it, and it pops up.
and I mean, you know, and you're doing well. Do you think did you ever take a business class in school?
I never did.
Should you have?
You know, actually, I had spoke to one of my good friends, and he took a business class.
Yeah. In high school or college?
In college.
Okay.
And he told me, he said he only took a few classes, and he told me his professor actually told him, he said, man, look, business, you don't need to take this class. And he said, I shouldn't be telling you guys this, but you don't need to take this class to become business owners. And you know, I was like, that's kind of crazy. You think about it, and it's like everybody that took that business class, if you really needed that to become a business owner, how many business owners would there really be right now? Because
right.
I mean, I think that's business, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, a lot of people take that class, and a lot of them go to work a 9 to 5, or they
go work at someone else's business.
someone else's business, but they don't make their own business. You know?
Right.
So I mean, even those teachers that know that textbook from page 1 to the end, why they not running the business?
Right.
You know, so I think it's just that
It's more like
it looks good on paper, maybe. I mean, I'm not saying that you can't find good information.
Yeah.
Or there are things that would help you, but as far as being necessary to be successful, I don't think so.
I ended the phone call thinking, like, that is massively discouraging. You know, if we talk about, like, how do you improve schools, which is one of my, like, 3 questions, right? But, like, one of the things that a lot of people say is, you know, you pay teachers or, you know, which is great. And that's part of it. I don't know if that's all of it. But I think a big part of it is, like, professionalism, that it's hard to attract the best people because you don't see any outlets for, like, advancement. Like, you know, like I said, your only raise comes because you didn't get fired, not because you did something great. And so if you know that you can create all this great stuff, but it's not necessarily yours, like, I think that discourages innovation.
Yeah.
You know, and I think in a state where our state legislature is on average fairly conservative, the idea that they would support the county owning what the teachers are doing in the classroom is kind of counterproductive, because these are the same people who would argue that letting small businesses work without regulation and own their stuff and do the thing creates the innovation that's, you know, builds communities and does all this great stuff. And it's like, but apply that back to what's happening in the classroom. Like you should own all of it, you know? And it's not to say that you should be like gouging taxpayers on it either, but I feel like it's a discouraging thing when you find teachers who are motivated enough to write a curriculum or to write a book and to do that, and the fact that they even have to question, is this mine or how does this go, I think is a huge problem, because the kind of teachers that we say we want to attract are also the kind of teachers who are going to do what you're doing. And then when you call into question, like, well, what is yours? And like, man, you're not paying me enough to do the rest of this, so I need to have it in the end. I think giving teachers more rights to their own stuff and more professional trust in what they're doing would be a step. Like, if you could change school, add something, delete something, I mean, it could be anything, like make the day longer, shorter, more technology, less, like anything, think out of the box. What's something that you would do differently in a public high school that you think would help people more? Like, you went to a pretty good school, you know, and you're doing well now, but what would have been better than what you experienced or what most kids get?
I feel like, honestly, I feel like we need to pay teachers more, just because it's very obvious that a lot of teachers, at least when I was in high school, were very jaded or just like did not care. And I feel like that's why I gravitated towards your class a lot, because you actually took the time to get to know everyone. And I feel like that's super rare. And I feel like if teachers were paid more to care, then it would be a totally different experience for a lot of kids who kind of need that extra like support system.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I just remember like many teachers, especially in math, that makes sense because it's kind of just like this is what you have to do and this is the only way to get it.
And something, you know, I will say that a lot of the better math teachers I know, and at Broad Run, the math department's awesome, you know, and I'm not just saying that, like, they go above and beyond. They do summer programs for the kids. They do like a boot camp for like 2 weeks before school starts. Come to the library. It's free. They don't even get paid for it. They pre-teach all this stuff so that you don't waste the first month of school in review for any of the kids who show up, you know, like that's awesome.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's typical. And I think that's one of the reasons that maybe a lot of people, if you're not good at math already.
Yeah. I mean, I was terrible at math.
Lean away from it because you don't have that personal touch.
Yeah. And like every single math teacher I've ever had either gave up on me like almost immediately or just kind of let me slip on through.
Why do you think that is?
I mean, I know that I was a terrible student, and if I could get away with something, I would do my very best to do that.
What do you mean you're a terrible student, though?
Okay.
Like, I mean, I taught you in an honors English class that you did reasonably well in, and that was a hard class.
But you actually took the time to get to, like, to teach us personally.
Right.
And, like, that actually, like, I felt respected in your class. In other classes, I didn't really feel that personal touch or even acknowledged as a person. Like, I know that I am your student, but am I a person to you? Because a lot of the time, yeah, exactly. And like, I felt a lot of the times that we were kind of just like overlooked. And if I slipped out of the class to go to the bathroom and then like never came back, they wouldn't even notice. And I would come back the next class and they'd be like, do you have this and this? And I'm like, I didn't even get that paper because I wasn't even here.
Or they notice, but it's not worth the time to write an email, do the report.
Exactly.
And I will, you know, to put into a little bit of context, maybe even for you, but certainly for, say, anyone who's listening that would be older and wasn't in or around schools at that time. Like, what year did we say? 2010?
2011 is when I graduated.
11. So I taught you 9, 10, and you graduated 10, 11.
Yeah.
Right? We're just on the other side of, like, the Great Recession. And so when the housing market tanks, property values tank, which means property taxes tank, and that's how you fund your local schools. And so that was right around the point where, like, I didn't get a pay raise for like 3 years or something. And so I think that concern about paying teachers changes time to time. You know, are you getting raises or are your cost of living adjustments keeping up with? And then also, you know, because when you're not getting paid, you don't feel valued. You know, for better or worse, there's a lot of ways you can show people that you care and all the rest. But we live in a capitalist society where, you know, money talks. And when you're not getting even the little incremental raises that you normally expect, you start to feel like this doesn't matter to other people.
Exactly. Like no one's really paying
attention.
And
then it's easy, you know, I mean, I know I struggled with that a lot. I probably talked about money more the year I taught you in TA than maybe the one year after.
See, but you never let that affect your students though.
Well, no, because you know, for me, it's, I always say anything that's worth doing is worth doing right. And, you know, you don't have to do it perfectly. You just do it the right way at a minimum. If it's not worth doing the right way, then you should find something else to do. But, the pay teachers more is good, assuming that you have good teachers.
That's a good point.
You don't have to rush life.
Yeah. Go with purpose.
Exactly. Yeah. Have motivation, purpose, direction, motivation. That's the three things that they tell me as a leader.
What is purpose?
Purpose, direction, motivation. Yeah, that's what they tell us to provide to our guys. And there's like a bigger definition with it, but those are like the three main words, and that's what a good friend of mine told me to always remember. So purpose, direction, motivation.
That's actually it's a nice like simple test of things too. If you think about like finishing high school, am I going to go to college, get a job, do whatever, and when you're not sure of any of it, if you can't answer those three questions, what's my purpose, what's my direction, what's my motivation, like if any part of that's unclear, you're right. Maybe that's the time to pump the brakes.
Yeah,
there's nothing wrong with.
Yep,
I like it.
We're in a fairly diverse community. There's a lot of people, both from different parts of the United States, that move to the Northern Virginia or DC metro area for work, for education, for things. But there's also a large immigrant population. Broad Run, where I teach and you graduated, is I think 50% white, and not all of those students were born here. But we're on the verge of being what they would call a majority minority school, and so the level of diversity in terms of race and religion, cultural background is probably, it's much more diverse setting than if you went to school in the middle of Iowa. And so I don't know how,
Yes, it's objective to where you are.
Yeah.
But where, I had the opportunity to be here, and, I did get, and, like I said, it was kind of negative that I had the language barrier, but also positive because I spent the first couple of years more of an observant, and I think that's how I learn most.
Right.
And I pay attention to details. So I would just observe the environment around me, and then, just kind of, then after, I kind of gathered all that information and processed it.
Right.
Then I was like, okay, this is what I think about this, and this is how I'm going to go about, these things.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting that as a filmmaker, someone with a degree in film, like what you just described is almost exactly the thing that you've ended up doing is watching carefully and then figuring out how to piece together what you're seeing so that other people see it your way. Really,